Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa with me, Chantal, always your hostess with the mostest, because look who I have with me again this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, wherever in the beautiful world you are. Thank you for joining us, and Jaymee Jay, it's so good to have you back with me again. And for those of you who haven't caught our previous shows, Jaymee Jay, I think this is your third or fourth interview now, um, and is a brilliant researcher on MK Ultra. Um, Anything system related, I'm going to say, Jaymee, you're a wealth of knowledge. You're also working a lot with SRA survivors as well. Um, and you bring an incredible amount of research and knowledge to the table. So it's always a great pleasure chatting with you. I know we generally sit for like half an hour before the show chatting, and then we go, oh gosh, we better press the record button. So it's always great to have you with me. How are you, and how has the week been for you?
I'm good. I'm definitely not a morning person, so you guys are getting me in kind of an altered state, but that's okay. I'm happy to be back, and I'm just excited to do some fresh shows because, yeah, I'm a researcher, but I'm a generalist. Like, I could barely pick a major in university. Like, I'm just interested in everything, and I think when I do podcasting, I just like to talk about different new topics because, like, I think we were just talking this morning about like how much content there is out there, and so I never want to
Mm.
waste people's times repeating the same things on all my podcasts. If they're going to give me their time and attention, I want like to us to be talking about something new so that it's like a valuable use of people's time. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for the topic today because I don't think I've ever done a show on this topic. So, yeah, just really excited to keep it fresh and go in a new direction and just, yeah, talk about something interesting and new for people.
Ditto to that, because I think the topics we're delving into recently, and I know with Chris's recent show as well, on the connection between BDSM and MK Ultra, um, with having the conversations with you as well on similar topics. I know that, well, possibly by the time, no, actually, I don't think so. By the time we air the show that the interview I did with Sean um, on circumcision, brilliant. I mean, wow, such an eye opener. And I think, yes, these are not easy topics to delve into and not comfortable to even listen to or contend with, but it is so important that we start facing a lot of this stuff, like the circumcision as well. And today, with what you and I are going to be talking about, is sibling rivalry, sibling bullying, blended families. Again, there's so much about these things we don't talk about that we accept as the norm, and kind of when we get into adulthood, well, that happened when we were kids. It's okay, stop bringing up the past or whatever. But unconsciously, gosh, excuse me, these patterns repeat themselves throughout our lives, actually. And unless they are healed, these wounds are healed, they're always going to continue in other relationships or current relationships. There's always the underlying issue of that bullying. You either become like the victim or the villain. Our society is that victim villain root chakra stuff, right? So this is where we have been disconnected by the powers that currently be. They know exactly where to disconnect our energies as human beings and in the SRA and stuff like that. So we really want to bring attention to these things because this is all part of the programming. And Jaymee, I love that you've been speaking about that as well. So yeah, over to you. I mean, It's wonderful
Yeah,
that we can broach this. Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's an important topic because I think most people have some type of trauma from the family they grew up in, in
Yeah.
regards to the siblings. And even like I know people who are single children as well, and there's pros and cons to that as well. But I think with the
Oh, yeah.
sibling bullying, I mean, like bullying wasn't even acknowledged for a long time. Like as we move through history, like sexual abuse, well, there wasn't even child abuse, and then there was no sexual abuse, and then there was no, sibling abuse. And um, I actually worked with foster kids, and that's where I really started to learn some of the because a lot of these kids come from trauma, and so when they put them in a home together, there's a lot of reenactment of these traumas on
Right.
the other kids, and those aren't biological siblings always. Well, sometimes they are, but mostly it's not. Um, but I think it gets really invalidated, just like when people have somebody could have like actual complex post-traumatic stress disorder from being bullied in school. I mean, like that's like being sent to a prison every day. It's that same like in university I wrote a paper comparing schools to prisons because they actually are the same, right? Like it's like you have to go there, there's these little cliques that form, and then there's hierarchies
Yep.
and there's rules, and then so it's actually like really, really similar sociologically. And I think people get really invalidated. Like they'll say, oh, kids are just kids, and you know what I mean? But like kids can be really cruel, and that like imprints somebody for a lifetime when they're vulnerable and trying to fit in and insecure. And with the sibling bullying, I think it really needs to be acknowledged because I think a lot of people have trauma from that, and it gets really invalidated and dismissed. Like, oh, like of course your older sister bullied you or whatever, and it's like it's really the same as being stuck as a prisoner of war somewhere where you guys are like in the same place, you can't escape, you're stuck with this person, and this person is an intimate abuser, right? Like they know your parents' personality, they know your personality, they know how to do things in a way that's pushing buttons and being subtle and covert. And you know what I mean? Like it's like they've kind of understand how to play these family dynamics like an instrument. And so it's a very scary place to be when you're a child and you're helpless and you're stuck there and you don't have the means to leave. And when this kind of stuff starts happening, it's like, of course, that's going to be like a post-traumatic stress-inducing scenario, right? So I think it's really important that we just can validate people that, you know what, if that's still affecting you today, like, of course it is, and that's totally normal, and why wouldn't it?
Absolutely. You made a very interesting point saying that schools are similar to a prison system, and I fully agree. I was at boarding school, so I would most certainly say not only schools, but when you attach that to the boarding school, that's even more so because you're ruled by bells. You are ruled by the iron fist. You don't comply with the rules, you're punished. You
Mhm.
do this, you're out. You're not allowed that or that. You can be there from that time to that time. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was at boarding school from the age of 5 until nearly 18, end of 17. Yeah.
See,
So
I
there's a lot of
when I was a kid, I used to want to go to boarding school because I grew up in a really chaotic, permissive environment, and so I craved structure. And I think children do crave structure, but like not the way that it's done in our society. I think it's actually really abusive because like I had social anxiety and stuff, so making me go into a big group of people every day was like causing an actual physiological response in me every day that never went away no matter how much I went there, right? And so that's it.
exactly.
And when I joined the military when I was older, almost everybody there was the same. They all like grew up in a really like chaotic, permissive, non-structured way, and they all had joined the military because they just wanted structure. So that's the other side of it,
Ah,
right? Which is the
interesting.
opposite of
Yes.
you,
Mm.
right? And I didn't think like I actually didn't do good in school, which people find really shocking. But it's because I didn't like the feeling of being told I have to stay in a room and I have to go on the clock. And like that gave me actually such physiological anxiety. Whereas when I went on correspondence, I did 3 years in one and got straight A's. And like I'm an autodidact. I love reading. I love knowledge. Like there's no reason I shouldn't have excelled academically, except for the structure of the school was so
Right.
traumatic. And so I think like forcing any kid, especially like an introverted child, to go to school is like, that's just like dropping them into a piranha tank, you know?
Exactly. And it's so true. Absolutely. When you talk about the environment in which kids are taught and the environment in which you were taught, which disabled you from excelling, and I totally agree with that, because I think research has shown that boys, especially boys, should not be taught for the first 12 years of their life in an enclosed space. They should be outside. They should be expressing and expending their energy in nature and, yeah, sometimes convening, obviously, in a room. You don't want to keep them outside all the time, but, let them express naturally. And yes, learn the stuff you need to learn, okay? Um, I think there is stuff that we as a society need to learn. We need to learn our ABCs and our one, two, threes kind of thing, because that's how we communicate with each other. But truth, we haven't been taught truth. That's the problem. And that's part of the bullying system. We've been bullied into believing, sorry, that everything we taught is true. And we go back to that master slave system we were speaking about last week. This is it. We're bullied into believing, we're bullied into being forced to register our children, being forced to vaccinate our children, being forced to take our children to school at a certain age, at a certain time, and being forced to give them a certain curricula, unless you have money that you can pay others to give you something more in line with yourself. I don't know, it's such a crazy system, right? But it does begin at home. Everything
Mm-hmm.
begins at home in the family environment, doesn't it? So we've seen how systematically the cabal or the dark brothers and sisters um, systematically break down the family unit. They create mistrust, distrust. They separate parents and children's. They mind control mothers, and mothers therefore do the most heinous things to their children. That is such a trauma for the child, just that in itself, never mind anything else, right? And then they create, also, we've been told within the system, you get the different, kids. You're going to have the kid who excels. You have the kid who's the bully. You have the kid who is bullied. You have the scapegoat. They have the different characters within the family unit that play themselves out all the time. So I'd really be interested to hear your take on, I know it's kind of multi-layered, but on all of that.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, and I know you know more about this than me, with the children, but like, there's actually a lot of research that sending children to school actually impedes their learning. Like the best thing, and if you look
Right.
at the Waldorf schools and stuff that were based on Rudolf Steiner's work and stuff, like
Mm.
this is all proven. Like the more you can just let kids play. Like I don't have children, but I always said if I did, like I would just have like a room for them full of like books, art supplies, instruments, like anything that they could use their imagination or play with. Like I always think just put them there with tough stuff to explore, and like that's actually how like children make themselves smart, by following their own curiosity and exploring and playing, like role playing and all that. Like there's tons of
Yes.
research. It's not even a conspiracy. Like the way the school system is set up actually impedes that. It destroys like children's natural gifts and exploration of their gifts, and then it gives them obedience training, which is that your value comes from compliance, right? So if you do what your teachers say are good And if you don't do what you're told, you're bad. And parents do that to their kids too. Like a lot of people have children and they have a master slave relationship with their child where the child will comply with them. If the child like defies them, then they apply punishment for the defiance. Like it's not about whether the child was right or not, it's about defying the parent in a master slave
Yes.
relationship. And so of course, like one of the best books I've read is an old book by William Reich. And William Reich's a real generalist too. Like he writes on everything, but he wrote a book called The Mass Psychology of Fascism. And it's an older book. I don't know when it was written, but anyways, he really explains how the external social structure gets internalized. And so when you live in like an industrial society, like where men are working at the factory and doing what they're told and stuff, like they come home and they're like, I'm the head of the house, and they just reenact that same scenario onto their family and the same dynamics. And then so and actually I did a few shows with Kat Waters too. She really talks about this stuff. And then the family, the way the family system is, it goes both ways, right? So they internalize the external structure, and then the way the family is structured goes out into society. And so the school system destroying creativity, and then also the way they've destroyed the family actually goes hand in hand. And like we were talking earlier about step families and blended families, and like we can kind of talk about that a little bit more. But like it's something I want to mention, and it actually connects back to the pornography, is like how much of the pornography is like daddy stepdaughter. Like that's actually one of the main categories, and like that's really intentional that they're doing that, because now that they've broken the family up, they're and even if a person's not searching that in their porn search or whatever, like it always will come up on the algorithm because it's just planting a seed, because there's biological reasons why people bond to their own DNA and children and stuff. And so now that there is so many blended families, they're really kind of just like trying to plant that seed into people's mind of, well, it's not your real daughter and it wouldn't really be incest. And like so they're really trying to promote that because they want everyone on the planet to be sexually abused. Like in Kathy O'Brien's book, I think she said that George Bush said if he could get 3 generations of people sexually abused on the planet, they could completely take over, like because of the epigenetics, because of the autogenic ability to dissociate and becoming docile from sexual abuse. And this goes back to Himmler research on sexual abuse. This is what they were researching. And so it actually all connects together. I'll just kind of leave it there and let you comment on that. So I'm talking a lot, but
No, I so agree with that. Isn't that the 3 generations, the monarch programming as well?
yeah.
Because if you think about it, from the caterpillar to the butterfly, it's the only creature on Earth that completely changes its DNA. So that, no doubt, is what their intention is. And that really, for me, is probably why they would be following that pattern, but they've reversed it, right? So now from coming out of the darkness into the light, so to speak, right? You're coming from the light into the darkness with what they really, the way that these guys are operating. So it's very interesting that you're saying. And also the child porn, the teen porn, friend who's a in the news, in the media. Oh, I just sorry, my camera just died. Who's in the media showed me a number of years ago what they were researching. And on any computer, and this was probably 10, 15 years ago, you could already then type in this, whatever, on the porn, and the most horrific porn. And as you say, the stepfather to daughter, the one that I sat there looking was the father punishing the daughter by graping her, taking her, and I mean, I will
Well,
not
it's
forget
all
that
trauma
scene.
bond. Like, yeah, it's
Right.
all trauma bonding. It all goes together.
It's disturbing.
It all goes
So
hand in
there's
hand.
such a, yeah, there's such a disconnect between love and sex, and what the true intimate sexual act is about. It's destroying it right there, right at the base, at the most important level of trust. Mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, uncle, aunt, right? Teacher, all the close people to you are usually the ones that are going to be the one or the ones that destroy that trust. And it's very, very, very difficult for anyone to go back after that and heal that. That's a lot of spiritual work to get to that point, where it's authentically healed, right? But so a lot of people, because it literally changes the cells, the shape of the cell in the body when a child is violated like that. And we know the mother
Mhm.
cell creates the daughter cell, right? So once the mother cell is damaged, all the daughter cells are going to be damaged too, or obscured. So the lens with which you view the world is completely warped. And that's
Yeah, and
unfortunately what they want.
like a female fetus inside of a mother at 4 months old already has her ovaries developed and all of the eggs she'll ever have for her lifetime. So like you're even as an egg in your mother's um, ovaries when she's a 4 month old fetus in your grandmother, you're being programmed epigenetically by your grandmother's DNA, and then as well as your experience, like even vibrationally in the womb. And that same water is transferred through cells. Like that water is imprinted, and it is transferred. Like that water actually lives through the people through each. Like it
Yes,
doesn't. It programs the new water. So, just thinking about how far back this actually goes, and like something I always try to explain about evil and Satanism and the difference between God and good is like Satanism always wants to invert things, but they can only get inversions when things are out of context. And so God is a God of like wholeness and putting things in context and seeing all the parts connected as one, whereas everything that's satanic is taken apart, whether that's like it's always compartmentalized, because that's the only way is when
yes,
you're not looking at the whole, it could ever even be tempting to invert something, right? And so even if you look at the school system where it's like every subject is separate, when it's not, right? Like it's every it's blocks of subjects, and everything's put into like a structure of separation, and like it's seeing the trees instead of the forest. And so that's kind of how they're always doing this. So yeah, it all really goes together with like breaking down the family and then putting people in these structures. Um, and so just to bring it back to like the specific abuse between siblings, so there's kind of different levels of it. Like, obviously with a family that's multi-generational satanic program family, they're always gonna like abuse the siblings to hate each other and to be each other's kind of unconscious programmers by reenacting abuse dynamics, even on a subconscious dissociative level. That's always part of it. And also like a sibling that would go through the same trauma together without programming and dissociation, like there could be a bond there, just like when soldiers go to war together or something. There's a type of bonding. I don't really want to call it trauma bonding, but it's a bonding of intimacy, but by going through adversarial experiences together that nobody else can understand. And so they actually want to make
yeah,
sure that doesn't happen, right? They want to make sure there's strife between the siblings. And even if you watch on these TV shows, they really normalize like treating your little sister like crap, or like they're always on all these kind of Netflix shows, like they're just always normalizing treating other people like garbage all the time, and that like the most narcissistic person kind of rises up socially and in a status position. And so I think that it's
yes,
become so normalized that people don't address it as actual abuse anymore.
right, exactly. Abuse comes in so many different shapes and forms, doesn't it? I mean, you've worked a lot with teenagers and young people as well, and um, young people in these teenage group homes. Share with us a little bit about your experience regarding that?
I'm just laughing. Just laughing. Teenagers have such a bad rap, and I've taken a lot of jobs that like no, like I'm kind of notorious for working with the people nobody else like. They're like just send Jaymee in to deal with it because like I don't know if it's because I've been in the military. I just like the challenge like of like the worst social work cases ever. But I worked in some really hardcore like homes. I worked with one that was an all girls home, and it's kind of funny because when I was little, I used to watch that show that I think it was like called The Facts of Life, or was that the one with the group home where they had? I remember watching that show when I was a kid. It was about a group home, anyways. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that programmed me for later, but yeah, I worked in some group home with teens, and I think teens get a really bad rap, and yeah, they can be a lot to handle. But I actually love working with teens because that's where the potential to have influence, because they're literally still like this and they haven't gone in their destiny yet, and it's a really like it's the crossroads, right? And so they have their programming from growing up, but they still have a chance if you can actually make an influence in their consciousness at that age. And so I get really excited to work with teens because I've worked with a lot of adults too, and it's pretty hard to get somebody to change when they're like in their 40s and 50s, because there's just like it's so ingrained, these patterns, right? Whereas like teens, there's such an opportunity there, but it's not for the faint of heart, because like they can be a handful. So it's kind of an acquired taste if you want to go and work at one of those places. But I think people really miss out on a lot. Like I personally like think teens are so awesome, and I love them.
I'm so with you on that. Every rebel teenager that's out
And
there,
young
bring
women
him
too,
here.
because with the narcissistic abuse
Totally.
and stuff, I don't know why they don't teach this. Like, I'm like, no, I didn't need, that's what I needed to learn when I was like 15, 16. Like if somebody would have explained all this like abuse dynamics and narcissistic abuse to me, that would have saved me like a lifetime of just walking off a bridge, right? And so I always,
Right.
working with young women, and men too, but like that's the kind of stuff I get so excited to work on them with, because it's just knowledge and information that they don't have, right? Like they're innocent. They do not understand these dynamics. They haven't actually looked at the pie charts. Like if you just show them this information, it's like it's life changing, right? So that's another thing I really like working with young women too, because it's like they just don't know. They haven't been around long enough to have had these experiences to figure this stuff out. So it's like, yeah, I think that's where so much opportunity is there with them.
When you say that teenagers are getting a bad rap, what's why do you feel they're getting a bad rap? What do you
Well,
think's
I
going
feel
on
like
there?
I feel like they're in a really bad position for a number of reasons, because they're still treated like a child, but they're expected to act like an adult. So like they have responsibilities but no rights, and they have no resources, right? So like somebody who's, I mean, I just can imagine being 18 years old right now and having to go get a job in retail and have to try and rent a place with the rental market. Like could you just imagine the hopelessness of like, how is this person going to do it, and going and getting these university degrees which don't really you anywhere anymore anyways, like you know what I mean? It's just an industry in itself. I mean, it's not good to not have one, but having one's not going to put you up to a way higher socioeconomic status as it might have 50 years ago. It was pretty hard to get a degree,
Yeah.
right? So thinking of these young people, yeah, and I feel like everybody kind of treats teenagers like second class citizens instead of actually respecting them, like because they have so much to offer of like fresh eyes on things, like they're not aided by life experiences. Like if I had some company and had a think tank, like I would want some teens on there, you know what I mean? Because they haven't had
Right.
all these life experiences putting biases in them. And yeah, I don't think they get really any respect in society, you know what I mean? And they can't access resources. They're still kind of a slave to their parents because they need them to buy everything for them and stuff. Even if they get a job, it's going to be probably be like where they're treated like crap and a slave for minimum wage and exploited. And you know what I mean? Like I remember being a teen. It's when I worked with teenagers, I just was like, I promise you guys, this is the worst part of your life. If you can get over this hump, and then you get to do what you want in your life, like, and you get to go to school for what you want, and you can pick your career and you start making your own life. Like being a teen is a really hard period of life for anybody, and then they just want to like put them all on these antidepressants and say, oh, there's just something wrong with you for being depressed. It's like, how would you not be depressed being a teenager in this society. I wouldn't imagine a person who wouldn't, unless they had a really special circumstances to make them not depressed in their social status in our society.
Don't you think in many ways that teenagers as well, when if we're just looking at I always look at the formation of the chakras, right? If you look 0 to 8, would be the formation of their stability, the root chakra. So it's their security. It's basically how safe they feel within their environment, how their communities, how safe they feel within the community, stuff like that. So their security, their foundation, right? And then after that, you get to 12 years old. So that's like the tween age where they're starting to express that emotionally now. So that's really kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to what your foundation has been about, right? So now you go from 12 to 18 in the solar plexus chakra, right? Which is your personal power. And that's really the age that the teenagers are. So they're trying to express who they are, what they understand about life, but that understanding is coming from their foundation. So what they've learned in the foundation of their life, because those are their teachers. So the teachers are going to be the parents, the family environment, right? Your siblings or grandparents, uncles, aunts, depending on how close knit your family is, right? So the child in their or the teenager is ultimately responding to their environment. So when we're looking at so many of the teenagers in these home for problem boys or girls or whatever it might be, right? We're really seeing a reflection of what's been happening in their home environment that has been undetected or unhealed or ignored or uh, what do you call it? Scapegoated to you. Do you know what I'm saying? If you are the scapegoat archetype in the family, that's often what happens, right? So you become the scapegoat and you become the one that carries the burden of the one who now takes the drugs or whatever. I will always say to parents, if your child takes drugs, it's not the child, that's the wound the entire family needs to understand. So it's not the child that needs healing, it's the family. The child is merely, or the teenager in this case, is merely reflecting back to the family where the wound has been ignored or unhealed. What is your take on that?
Yeah, scapegoating is a really important concept. It's like they're the presenter. It's like you went and did a group project together and one person comes to the podium and presents for the group. That's going to be the scapegoat. They're presenting the family dysfunction and being the representative of it, right? So yeah, it's a really important concept. I just wanted to add these I know people as adults now that have been in these residential homes, and I'm leaning towards more like many of these children are actually extremely gifted, and some of the like the gifted programs in school, they will offer families that can afford or whatever these special programs, but a lot of these kids that actually are gifted and like they're kind of identified and then sort of suppressed, like they're labeled as bad, deviant, troubled, like what I mean. And even that, like it's like putting the blame on them, like you're troubled. Well, yeah, obviously they're troubled by their family and their parents and the school. Like it's like, why are they being labeled? It's like somebody who is depressed being labeled as, oh, there's something wrong with you for being depressed, you need to be medicated, like what I mean, instead of saying like you're exuding what's been taken in, right? And so I think that's just kind of important to remember. Like I know a lot of these kids, like, a lot of them, they're artistic, they're talented, like they are gifted, and that's why they are like basically imprisoned, like they're not even allowed to exist in the social structure. They almost have to be like covertly destroyed, and put somewhere where they can't influence other people to be like in their gifts, right? So I think it's a lot darker, and I think a lot of these schools actually are just covers for MK Ultra programming, but then also for research, and they also do a lot of like drug trials and stuff, and it's actually really, really dark. And I'll just kind of leave it there because I'm going to actually do more of a deep dive on that, and I have some shows planned and some people coming that are going to be coming forward explaining some of this stuff. But I think it's kind of like, I know Paris Hilton came out with her thing, and I mean that's just a tip of an iceberg there, but you know, I'm glad there's some awareness being brought down to this, because like we're basically all, as human brothers and sisters on this planet, we're all kind of in like a troubled team, you know. That's almost what planet Earth is at this time. And like if you look at the sibling dynamics of abuse, like we actually, like on the planet, like whether we like each other or not, we are brothers and sisters, right? And so you'll see that these people in our society, in our hierarchical society, have like elevated themselves to paternal figures, right? Like whether that's like government or police or politicians or even celebrities, like they're kind of have made themselves into the parental role and us in an infantile role. But then the people, like all of us in you know, our rank in society, we are brothers and sisters. And like you see the abuse dynamics even playing out there, like people calling the cops on their neighbor for having people over at Christmas during COVID or something, right? Like that's the same as like a kid tattling to their parent. And they're always promoting this on TV as well, this kind of tattletale culture, like not being able to actually deal with your problems yourself, but having to go and get an authority figure to be your protector. And so I think a lot of people, because of what happens in the home growing up with sibling abuse and bullying, it gets like that, it doesn't get healed. And like I said, go work in any office and you will just see these dynamics like are like, I almost think that's why these spiritually, like why we end up going to these certain places, because it's going to be a perfect mirror of, you know, all of these concepts
Yeah,
played out. And you're going to go apply for a job and not even know why you ended up in that, and it's going to be all your trauma reenactment that you have to overcome. Like, and I've just seen it so many
exactly.
times, you know.
Exactly. Let's talk about sibling bullying. Let's break that down into the family unit where it first starts playing itself out. So, in your experience, what have you observed? What have you seen? Have you experienced any of that yourself? Anything like that yourself? Um, I'd love for you to share with us your what you've experienced regarding that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I don't really talk about myself that much on podcasts, but like I was just saying off camera that the older brother off of Stranger Things, the lifeguard bully brother, like when I watched that, that was actually the closest depiction I've ever seen of my own older brother. Like I had a complete like PTSD reaction to watching that, and the terror, like when he was
Wow.
terrorizing the little sister, that actually kind of looked like me when I was a kid with the red hair. And yeah, that was actually like the closest I could say. So I did actually grow up with that myself. And you know, for me, like
Paint the
overcoming, like
picture.
I because
Sorry,
sorry,
if you don't mind, just paint the picture of your family. Are you all your brother? Is he a half brother? Is he a full brother? So explain your
he's my
family
full older
dynamic.
brother. He's my full older brother, and he, like, I can honestly say, looking back, he was like born that way. And I wouldn't have always said that, but like I can look back to like being so little in the sandbox and like him throwing sand. Like it was like he literally just was that. And I know there's a whole nurture nature argument, and I think there is definitely an interplay of that always going on. But also, like, we grew up in the same family, and I do believe that children are born with a disposition. And like I can look back and say like, no, my little brother was like that, like or sorry, my older brother was like that since we were little. And then watching it sort of play out, I used to make excuses for people because I would have empathy, like knowing how they grew up and stuff, right? But then at some point, you know, there's personal agency. And I'm like, I grew up in that same family and I've gone the opposite way. So, like, I can't use that as the justification for why somebody would be one or the other, because you can see people growing up in the exact same family and they're polar opposites. So it's not just the environment. Although children can be treated differently in the same environment, it's like, I don't know, it's just something for people to consider. Like, I don't know. What do you think?
I actually listened to something yesterday, interestingly enough, talking about that, and I'm trying to think of the name of the podcast. But the guy was talking about exactly the same thing. You have exactly the same parents. You grew up in exactly the same family, had dinner around exactly the same table for X amount of years, and yet each person experiences their parents or their situation differently. And he put it quite interestingly. He said, well, of course they did. He said, when they had the first child, they were in a different place together. Maybe financially, they were in a different place together. They just got married. They were all in love and googly eyed, whatever, you know. Come dynamic too. Maybe there was an affair between the two already, you know, or mother-in-law or something, or their relationship, mom and dad's relationship is in a different place. So the child experiences the family unit differently. Each child experiences the family unit differently. So it is actually a different family, which made such perfect sense to me. And I think if we can see it as that, because suddenly for me it was like, taram, the penny dropped. Of course, you know, if I look at my family structure, I mean, there's six of us, okay? Um, my older sister experienced it in her way. She was the firstborn, um, and she and my mother were like this. She was like my mother's confidant, which I think is the dynamic with a lot of older firstborn children. They become, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, oftentimes, as was the case with her as well, um, became my mother's, I don't want to say therapist, but the one my mother told her
Bit of
problems to,
role
and especially,
inversion there.
yeah, totally. And then, of course, my second sister was like a total tomboy. And so she was the son my father hadn't had. So she took on that role, which created a incredible dynamic between the two older siblings, right? A lot of animosity between those two growing up. I remember that. And if you look back now, it was jealousy at how the parents were relating with them. You know, at the time, you don't see it. Then, of course, came number three, who was the angel, right? The absolute angel that everyone loved in the family, you know, um,
The
the
golden
people
child.
pleaser, the golden child, absolutely. Guess who arrived next? Ta-da! But I'll have you know, I'm the only one born on my due date. The others were, it's so funny how it is. The others in my family, I'm the only one who does not have a family name. I'm the only one who is Rh negative. I'm the only one who, like, they all even numbers this year in their birthdays. I'm an uneven number. They're all 2 years apart, and I like decided to be 3 years apart and 18 months, you know, between the next one. So all of these little things, you know, and then, but I'm the only one born on my due date. None of the others are born on their due date, you know. So it's like, definitely, if you have to look at I call myself the golden sheep, right? That'd be me. And then, of course, after me came the two boys. Oh my gosh. And my brother was like 18 months younger than me. So I was 9 months old and my mom fell pregnant. So I had no idea what it felt like to even have my mother to myself. I was craving my mother's attention as a kid. And my mother, because I was psychic and I could see things, um, I didn't know what it was until the age of 4. I remember my grandmother then explaining, although my mother's a seer as well. My grandmother and my mother are both seers, and I'm a seer. I didn't know what I was seeing as a kid. I was just seeing things, and I was like, "What are you?" It was like, "What are you talking about? She's crazy," you know. Um, so that for me was very challenging. And I never felt like my mother was ever connected emotionally. There was just too
Mhm.
many of us. in my mind. And I wished I was the only child, because if the others were gone, then I'd had my parents all to myself. That was for the longest time the narrative in my head. And I was the naughty one. I was the impossible one. I was the one who didn't listen. I was the one who was cheeky. You could not give me a hiding. If you gave me a hiding, I flip and went back and did it again until you stopped giving me a hiding. I taught my mother, that's one I taught my mother, is you giving a kid a smack is not working. My mother realized that when I was 4. And that's when she
Mm-hmm.
changed her idea about how she raised us. It was not going to be with smacking us, it was going to be by talking. So that was interesting, the whole thing. And then, of course, because my mom didn't know how to deal with me, my older sister was like, took on the role of being my mother. And boy, she was like the frickin' Gestapo. She was 6.5 years older than me. I was terrified of her. If there's anyone in my life I've been scared of, it's her. Seriously. And
Mm-hmm.
if there was anyone I would say either had the Stockholm syndrome to, it would be her. Because she had the ability to build me up and break me down and shut me off and mortify me. And and
Mm-hmm.
yet when her and I were alone, she was fantastic. But bring anyone else into the mix, she was awful to me, as adults as well. This went on for the longest time until I told her recently, I said to her, no more. You've bullied me for the longest time. And I had to admit to myself that I'd been bullied. Never in my life did I think I would be bullied. It was never a physical thing, ever. I mean, I'm sure she gave me a few slaps as a kid, no doubt. But she had such a mental, always telling me how bad I
Mm-hmm.
was, how naughty I was, what a impossible child I was, and how I never listened, and I'm still the same, and how irresponsible, negative, 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 negative all the time. I tried to prove myself to her.
Mm-hmm.
When I started menstruating, I told her, not my mom. So that's the kind of relationship she and I had. I
Mm-hmm.
was so scared of her, but I sought her approval for the longest time. So I would say that for me was definitely,
A
I
lot
hate
of
to say the
times,
word.
like people, sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 I'm done. I'm done.
A
I'm
lot of
done.
times people will say like, "Oh, you date your dad or you date your mom," and like that never made sense to me because I'm like, no, I don't. Like these men I was, seeking approval from were not like my parents. And I think you can actually date your sibling that you have Stockholm syndrome to from that same dynamic. And I think that's something that maybe people can look at themselves. If you look back at your partners, like I believe you may be reenacting through a repetition compulsion a sibling that bullied you to try and reenact that in a way that you get your needs met from that person. And I think I don't know if people think about that. They think it's going to always be one of the parents, but especially in a large family where the older siblings become the parental figures and kind of a hierarchy to the younger children, I think that's probably really common for people to have that
Mm,
dynamic play out. And I don't know, I love the birth order book. It's a little bit dated, but like there's definitely something to that. And there's definitely like things to consider in the dynamics of growing up in these large families. And I know people from really large families, and I know people from single children too. And I'm always like, psychoanalyzing everybody I'm hanging out with and watching these kind of dynamics. And like, in these large families, it's like there is like I always talk about the concept of emotional incest, which is when an adult's getting their emotional needs met from their children. And so that can be where
mm,
a parent is kind of spousifying one of their older children to meet their emotional needs
right.
because the spouse isn't. And that can be even worse with an only child where like the mother kind of is really expecting that son to be like the man in her life at lieu of being with a absent spouse of their own. And then also with these large families, it's like the older children are given adult roles, and so they're in a way they kind of do get jealous and resentful because they see the little baby getting all the baby
Mm,
attention. And so yeah, these
mm,
dynamics, like, I mean, they're really real. And I mean, I think we can have empathy for everybody, because I think no matter what scenario you get put into, something's going to get you somewhere or another, because they all have their kind of pros and cons, and there's trauma in each different scenario. Like, you know, like no matter which way you cut it, there's going to be something you need to overcome from the way that your family dynamic was set up. um and
absolutely.
I
I'd be
think
interested to know from you if just from what you were saying earlier on, your older brother, was he like a physical bully to you? Did he like beat you? And how much older was he than you? And how have you found that to play out in your life? I'd be interested to know that.
I don't know. It probably wasn't an accident. It probably just made me like I basically my whole that's what I do for my whole identity is stick up to bullies. Like especially now with you know, like what people are doing with SRA. Like it's like that's part of my identity is like I'm so sensitive about people. Like to me, SRA is the ultimate bullying. Like where somebody just takes advantage of an innocent child, and it's a form of theft, and it's morally wrong. It's not just like a trauma thing for me. It's like an actual like moral legal issue
Right.
to me, where I'm like, you don't have the
Yeah,
right to do
right.
that. And so that's why I'm so passionate to stick up to, like, you know, these people thinking they can just take what they want. And you know, that probably did come from my upbringing. But yeah, my older brother, like if you watch the Stranger Things, like he was actually terrifying. Like he was physically fit and strong and bigger. He's 2 years older. He was sadistic. Like even young, like he would take joy in like watching you hurt yourself or hurting it, like, you know what I mean. So like I've really had to analyze like what, you know, like can somebody just be born that way? Because I think they can. I think some people are actually born with sadism, and they just like, I mean, yeah, it's like really, really terrifying when you're little, and you know, somebody like that, it can just like it is terror. Like you are terrified of what they can do to you, and that's with a male. But like I think with females, like what you're talking about is more of that emotional building bullying. And I always say like there's more male abusers, but the female abusers, like when you start getting into like these mothers of darkness or like these women programmers and stuff, like the male abusers are pretty simple. There's more of them, but they're less intricate. Whereas like the female abusers are smaller in number, but like the levels of emotional sadistic attunement and emotional abuse and the emotional sadism that they can incorporate into their abuse is like the equivalent of 10 times what a man could even like conceptualize to do. And they
Yeah.
also have that empathic like way of like just knowing how it would feel to do something. So yeah, when you have a female bully, it's especially one that knows you so well since you're born,
You're right.
and knows how to play your parents, and knows how to appear covert, and knows all your little sensitive spots. Like it's like that's just like another level of this, which is so much more subtle and beneath the surface than
But
a overt
family,
male bully.
totally. Family get-togethers for me, and even as an adult, and I'm talking about long after I'd left
Because you age
school and
regress instantly around them.
totally. It
Yeah,
was like the minute I would go back to a family gathering, she had the most uncanny ability to say the most cruel things and had the ability to really make me feel like I was 6 years old again. It took me the
absolutely.
longest time to get over that and to actually stand up. And she chose to not speak to me for 8 years. And that was the biggest, because I actually told her to F off.
Yeah,
And that was the biggest release for me. But yet every year on her birthday, I would call her until eventually we spoke. But then it was very different. My father was actually the mediator between us. And And then a lot came out that day. It was amazing, actually. This big sister who was this, what I'd put on the pedestal for so long, suddenly I saw her for her vulnerabilities and her fears. But that was after I had already been doing my stuff for 8 years. I was a healer. I was well on my way and understanding the dynamics of where my part in the family and my karma in this family and the role that I am here. And of course, hey, I was not an easy kid. I'm not gonna sit here and play. I gave as good as what I got, boy. There was no ways anyone was gonna be cheeky or take advantage of me. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I fought back. You're not going to stand there and think you can get away with things with me. As a kid, I had that consciousness.
I
Absolutely.
felt that way too. I
But
feel like I knew my rights when I was a kid. I knew I didn't
yeah,
deserve to be sick. I
totally.
knew I shouldn't have had to go to school. I knew that stuff was mine and shouldn't have been taken. Like I was born with like a sense of knowing my rights and a sense of justice. And I think a lot of rebels are. And I think that's why they try to
Totally.
get it out of the kids. But I can tell that in you too from listening to your story that you had that, right?
Totally. Totally. There was just no way that I was
And
like,
look what we're doing
and that
now as adults, right? Like it's like, no, you come in that way, you know.
really? You got really? You're still trying to tell me what to do? Haven't you learned it hasn't worked by now? My mother figured that out at the age of 4. She had to coerce me very nicely and she had to explain things to me. And when it made sense, it was like, oh, okay, cool. Let's do it. Same thing as, like just communicate. I'm a communicator. Communicate. We'll figure it out. Whatever it
Well,
is,
I don't
let's
know about
talk.
this whole
Yeah.
banking thing. Like I remember being in a class and this is in like kind of a Bible Belt town where people are, pretty conservative. And I remember them asking in one of my sociology classes, like who believes in spanking. And there was only me and one other person out of an entire class who said we didn't, which I found really interesting. And and yeah, I found that really interesting that we're the minority because to me, it's just like a no brainer that teaching your children, I'm bigger than you and I can hurt you, and therefore you will submit only because I'm bigger and can hurt you physically is not something we want to be teaching children because, like this is why
Exactly.
there's gangs and stuff older. Like this whole concept of I'm right because I'm bigger and I can hurt you. And actually, there's a lot of research that children that are spanked are um, more open to being sexually abused because they've already been told that like their adults can like dominate their body and have the right to like actually apply physical force and like, you know what I mean? Like it's already
But
pre-programming somebody that older
think
people can do that.
think about this. When your parents spank you, where do they spank you usually? On the butt,
On your root
root
chakra.
chakra. And then what do they do afterwards? Put you on the lap and comfort you.
Well, and it works because the child dissociates from the sudden slap of shock. It's an
Exactly.
actual altered state of
Exactly.
consciousness. So whatever you say to the kid when you're spanking them, it's just like a form of MK Ultra because it's actually programming right to the subconscious. And that's why the kid listens after, because you've actually bypassed their critical mind by shocking them,
Exactly.
slapping their root chakra, and then programming a
Exactly.
word to their subconscious. So yeah, I'm not saying it's not effective, but I mean, is this the highest thing that we want to teach and
No
model
way.
for children? And how's that going to come back on us as a society later in life? Like, I
And
don't
then
think it's a
we
good
we
thing.
complain about violence in our society. We want peace
It's
and peace and
violence.
love and peace. I mean, that's instilling violence on your kids.
It is
I
violence.
mean, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I mean,
And
it's
it's saying I
totally
have a right
violent.
to because I'm in a higher position than you and I'm because I'm bigger, and it's again it's that master slave. And why do you think people are going and reenacting all this and wanting to be spanked? And you know what I mean? Like it's like this is like a thing, you know what I mean? It's I just want to go back to one thing before I forget. I wrote down here there's a book. I think it's called The Human Magnet Syndrome by Ross Rosenberg. And I actually haven't read the book, but I've watched like a ton of his videos about the book. And he talks about this kind of, narcissist empath stuff and how we reenact it. But one of the key things that I learned from him is the power of induced conversation, because conversation is the verbal part of your brain is different than the written part of your brain. And that's why people like Kathy O'Brien say like to write out your trauma and stuff, because you're putting it across the corpus callosum to the other part of your brain. And so when you go and speak to somebody and you're an abuser, like you actually instantly begin to age regress. And that is actually out of your conscious executive control, because they're accessing the emotional right part of your brain through conversation. And so a lot of times, like you described it perfectly, like going to a family event or something. And like, I've been that way too, where like on the drive there, you're like, if my brother says this, I'm gonna, and then as soon as you get there, you just act like you're 5 again. And then you're driving home thinking, why the hell didn't I say anything? And you know what I mean? And you're mad at yourself. But you have to understand, like when the amygdala gets kicked out, it's involuntary. And so when you put yourself in a situation to go and speak with somebody, you have to be aware that you're putting yourself in a really dangerous situation to be age regressed. And so I always talk about this with like abuse survivors or people attempting to get out of cults or getting away from abuse groups. Like it's sometimes no contact is like the safest, smartest thing you can do, just because you're protecting yourself. Like even getting an email, it's not perfect, but it's better than going and answering a call, because as soon as your amygdala gets kicked out, like you're open. And so I just something for people to maybe
Right.
look into. It's a really good thing to understand, like that your power is before that happens, not when you're in it. Because once they start
Wow.
accessing your little inner child, and abusers know this, abusers know how to
Exactly.
access your inner child. So that's why it doesn't matter how smart you
Right.
are, how many books you've read, how many degrees you have. As soon as you get that part of your brain accessed, that's not what they're accessing. So just, I hope people look into that.
So true. And it's so true because, and now again, when we see that has happened as a kid, for example, and we're not even talking about extreme SRA or anything, yeah, we're talking normal family dynamics, okay, from a family that hasn't experienced extreme abuse, just normal crap. If that wound is not healed, that's exactly how you continue throughout your life, repeating the same cycles over and over again. It's how you self-sabotage. It's how you get to realize or get to believe, not that it's the truth, that there's nothing better out there in life than this, because it's so true. You know, if infidelity has been the order of the day in your family, it's hard to imagine what it's going to feel like to have someone who's faithful. So you learn to, for example, that adrenaline becomes your addiction. So you unconsciously create scenarios in your life that recreate those past experiences that give you that same um, high. So you create scenarios to give you that high where the payoff is what? What's the payoff? There's always a payoff. We've got to remember that, because that's an addiction. There's always a payoff. So why are you self-sabotaging? Why do you keep recreating situations where you are deceived? Why do you keep recreating situations where you are bullied? Why, whatever it might be for you. If you go back to those, it's exactly what you were saying, Jaymee, going back to those early days, thinking about how the family dynamic has played itself out and not putting yourself into the victim or the villain mode. Things are what they are. When we come into the family, I mean, I was number 4 daughter. When I came in, well, I was competing, you better know. And I'm a double Aquarian, okay? I was 16 months old and speaking fluently. People couldn't believe it. I understood. It's like I had 3 older sisters. I was fighting for my role in that family. You better believe it. That's why I said I wasn't a victim. Don't think I was like me. Yeah, definitely. I know how I felt on the inside, right? But I certainly didn't portray that. So I wasn't this little what have you. But things are the way they are. We've got to accept that on some level, this is our soul's path and our soul's journey. And as Rumi says, once we as humans accept the problems we've been given, the doors open. And that's a very true thing. In other words, when we accept truth, then peace ensues. And from that place of peace, we can make decisions on how to move forward. It's not coming from a place of pain or trauma anymore. So I
Mhm.
love what you said there, to have a look at these things.
Absolutely.
And I think you've given us some really, really valuable insights here today. So I have to say thank you for that.
Yeah, really good points. You just summed it up perfectly. And something that really I found helpful is like I think everybody should just read at least one book on family constellations. There's a whole bunch out there. Like there's one you'll like on more specific topics to you, but like, and also something else that I studied was like masterminds and systems theories because, and I think systems theories and cybernetics, and I know that probably sounds like weird stuff, that nerdy stuff that people don't even know what that is, but like it has to do with the way that there's computer systems and stuff, but you have to understand that the people socially engineering our society think like this, and so they have like they understand systems, like even military strategists and like people that are um, you know, in heads of organizations, they think systemically. They think about a system. It's not, even though they want us to all think in individual parts, they're always thinking of how those parts are always interacting. And so
Mm,
you think of family constellations, it's like a mobile, right? So like one part moves, all the parts move. And so yeah, I really like what you said about like it's really easy to like separate everything out to like victim, perpetrator, and you know the triangle and stuff, but it's victim, persecutor, rescuer triangle and stuff. And even that's a constellation though, because people move around, and when one person moves on that, the other people move to the
mm.
other positions. And so I think like having a basic understanding of cybernetics and systems theories, like I know those are really big, but just like get a general idea of that, because it'll really change your perspective of how all these things work. And again, and I need to always tell myself this all the time too, because I always need a reminder almost every single day. It's like, don't try to control the mirror, control yourself, because that's how you move the mobile, is by changing your position. You're never going to force the other parts of the mobile to move so that you're in another position. Your power is always with you, whether that's dealing with a narcissist, whether that's dealing with tyranny. Like if you're, as soon as you're trying to get them to change, like your energy's actually getting vampired into them. So it's like always bringing it back to yourself and how you can change
Right.
your position on the mobile in the constellation, and that's going to just affect the whole. And just I'll just leave it on that, just for a final thought on how this all plays out. And of course that's what a family is, right? It's a constellation.
It totally is. And it's so true what you're saying. You know, you're constantly moving into victim, villain, rescuer, perpetrator, whatever you call it, right? And it's so true to be able to recognize that, you know. I think spiritually, our family really are spirits that have come here with us, who love us very much. We love each other very much, and we're just really here to show each other our shit. And that was something Morna actually said at a workshop many, many years ago, and I've never forgotten that. And it's so true because we mirror each other, we reflect each other. You know, each of us are just fighting for our way, for acceptance, for love, for whatever it might be. And I would love to, you know, even talk further along these topics because for me, the most important relationships that we need to heal are those with our family. And they are often the most difficult because when you're looking at like the bullying, I had to really look at my relationship with my sister. And I tell you, there was amazing stuff, lots of past life stuff that came up. I understood why that was playing out the way it was. And then until I was able to see it for the truth and realize what she's showing me about me was like, oh, finally I got that one, the last bit of that one. You know, we are teachers for each other, actually. They're not doing it to us, they are being it for us. There's a big difference when we can look at things in that way. But
And
anyway,
that doesn't mean it
I,
doesn't hurt and that people shouldn't have empathy. Like I really have empathy for people, and it really bothers me how much people get this dismissed when they try to come forward with it.
mm,
And I just wanted to leave
absolutely.
leave the show with like a validation of like how painful and traumatic this is for a lot of people, like well into adulthood, and that I don't feel like it really gets the validation and acknowledgement that it does. I think it gets dismissed all the time, and I just wanted to like just send out a general validation for anybody that's going through this. Like, it's very real. It's very painful, and it's real, and you matter, and it does matter, and the pain that you experience is something that's affected your whole life. And I just want to leave on that note that I hear you, and there is empathy for all the people that go through this, because for a lot of people it is the most painful thing for them. So I just want to leave on that note.
And I appreciate that. I think it's a beautiful note to close off on, because I so agree with you. And I just wanted to say as well, as a healer for 30 odd years now, I can say for sure at least 85 to 90% of the people that I've worked with have had issues relating to the topic that we've spoken about tonight. So it's a huge thing. And I think it's nothing to be brushed over. So those of us who are on the healing path and on the healing journey and seeking for truth and seeking healing within, we need to understand this is a big thing in our healing journey. And it's not about blaming your siblings. It's about also, yes, we all need to be held accountable. They need to be accountable as well, but you also need to be accountable. And that is also, you've chosen this experience. The question is, why? There's always a wonderful reason for that. So, thank you, everybody. It's been awesome again, Jaymee. And look forward to having you on again. Um, Okay, I'm not going to do notices now. I've just realized it's not actually a live show. Okay, guys, take care. Jaymee, we will be doing another follow-up interview again as well. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody, for a wonderful topic. Jaymee, is there anything? I know all your details are in the description area. Anywhere people can find you right now, websites, links, anything like that?
Sorry, it's freezing up a little bit, so I'm just gonna say thanks to everybody for listening, and
Okay.
thank you, Chantel, and I'll just say goodbye.
Okay, we froze up there a bit. Okay, guys, take good care. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you very, very soon.